A very pleasant morning to the Sunday School. I trust that you're all doing well this morning. As we meet in this other fashion, I want to take us through a brief summary of the Sunday School lesson. The topic for today is difficult passages in Genesis and Exodus. Our study outline comes to us from three subtopics: supernatural experience, Genesis 15, verses 17 to 18, dangerous omission, Exodus 4, 19 to 26, and forbidden vision, Exodus 33, verses 11 through to 23. The central truth of the lesson: even difficult scriptures contain truths for our benefit. The evangelistic emphasis: incomplete understanding should not stand in the way of believing in Jesus Christ for salvation. And the golden text comes to us from Deuteronomy 29 and verse 29. And it says, "The secret things belong unto the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever." Now, today, this lesson, I must say, it's not a very easy one, and it's going to take some reading on your part. So, the Bible is God's word to us, but in order for the Bible to fulfill its purposes in our lives, we must understand it. Therefore, we believe God gave us His word in an understandable and clear form. This means that the message of the Bible is not a puzzle we must piece together, or a secret mystery we must solve. So the Bible is not a puzzle. It is something that the Bible is a book that we must read, and we must ask God to give us understanding. It is written in normal human language, and we must endeavor to understand when we would have read. Now, we also admit that many passages of scriptures are sometimes difficult to understand, and that is true. So let's look at the first subtopic. And the first subtopic that we're looking at is supernatural experiences from Genesis 15, verses 17 through to 18. And you could just read that in your Bible, and then we just look at what it is saying. Now, therefore, when God appeared to Abraham in a vision, and he promised to be his exceeding great reward, Abraham was somewhat argumentative, and he was kind of arguing with God. However, even though God had promised, God's promise had not come to fruition, Abraham decided to trust God fully. Right? So this promise was made when Abraham was Abram and his wife was Sarai. Right? And when his name was changed, Abraham still did not see the fruition. The promise wasn't fulfilled, but Abraham still decided to trust the Lord. Right? And so we moved into the other aspect of the lesson from verse 7 to 11, where instructions were given. God gave Abraham instructions to have a covenant ceremony. Now, in this covenant ceremony, the land of Canaan, the Lord told Abraham that the land of Canaan belonged to him and his descendants, right? And so what the Lord said, they knew that Abraham sought an agreement. He wanted to seal it. So God said that he would have made a covenant with Abraham. And so the Lord directs Abram to prepare everything required for a covenant ceremony. He was to kill a heifer, a female goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon, right, for this ceremony. And so these were supposed to be clean animals, the type of animals that will later be used, by Israel in their sacrifice. And so the animals are split into halves, representing the two parties of the covenant, Abram and God. And so, because of the small size of the birds, you can understand that we couldn't divide the birds, right? But the halves are laid out opposite each other in two rows with spaces in between for someone to walk, And in this ritual, the parties making the covenant walk between the pieces of the animals to signify that if either party violates the covenant, they will suffer the same fate that the animals did. And so, after Abraham had prepared the animals and laid them out, and all of this was done, the sacrifice was made. The sacrifice was made, and that sealed the covenant. But guess what? The second visitation of God occurred the following night, where here comes God again visiting Abraham. And to talk about the second visit, if we're going to talk about the second visitation, we're going to look at Genesis 15, verses 12 to 16. And in this, as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham according to verse 12, right? Apparently God put him to sleep so that he could have been free from interruptions and distractions, so that he could have spoken to him. And the presence of the Lord was so powerful that Abraham was stricken with tremor, and he was engulfed in deep darkness. This is the only time the presence of God caused Abraham to experience a profound and awesome fear. Abraham was experiencing this for the first time, and so out of the darkness, the Lord spoke to Abraham and revealed to him an overview of the future. The Lord uses the emphatic phrase, know of a surety, right? Which means you shall know certainly. There is no doubt or uncertainty in what the Lord is about to reveal to Abraham. The descendants of Abraham would live as strangers in a foreign land for 400 years. This is what the Lord was saying to Abraham, right? Now, the reason for the 400 years delay is that the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full, and so they had to wait. Abraham had to wait, right? And then when we jump over to Genesis 15, verse 17 to 18, now God's manifestation of his presence, where again a deep sleep had fallen upon Abraham as the sun was setting, and God had spoken to him about the future. Some 15 to 30 minutes have now passed. The sun has vanished, and it is completely dark. The time has come for God to complete the next step of the covenant ceremony. So out of the darkness, Abraham sees two fiery objects coming near. A smoking furnace is an ancient cooking device, which may be a small clay pot that holds the fire of a pan. But then guess what? As a conclusion to the sacred covenant, the Lord once again promised Abraham that his descendants have been given the land of Canaan, which extends from the Euphrates River in modern-day Iraq to the Nile River in Egypt. Here comes God again, sealing his covenant with Abraham. Oh, what an awesome God that we serve. So now we are going to move over to the second subtopic, which is dangerous omission. And this is going to introduce us to a new text coming from Exodus 4, verses 19 to 23. Let's look at verse 19. Now, in the second part of the lesson, we move ahead in time, and now we're looking at the book of Exodus. And so Moses' conversation with Jethro seems to indicate that Moses is ready to return to Egypt. However, in order to ensure that Moses does not delay, the Lord speaks to him again and orders him to return to Egypt. The Lord adds a word of assurance saying, all the men are dead which sought thy life. And so Moses was now being urged to return to Egypt. Now let's look at Moses' life spared in Exodus 4, verse 24 to 26. And so the next episode of this story now is very puzzling. Immediately after sending Moses to Egypt, the Lord threatens to kill him, right? Apparently because he had not obeyed the law of circumcision. Here the Lord told Moses that he should circumcise his children. But in light of the seriousness of the covenant sign of circumcision, the Lord was unwilling to allow Moses to go any further until he circumcises Gershon, his son. And so Moses must have been stricken with some kind of illness. So Moses could not have done it. So guess what? His wife Zipporah did it. And using a flint knife, she circumcised her son and declared Moses to be a husband of blood. So here Moses was obviously weak, and his wife Zipporah did the circumcision. Let's look now at the forbidden vision in Exodus 33 verses 11 to 17. Now Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt and brought them to Mount Sinai, where God spoke to them out of the fire and smoke of the holy mountain. But Moses desired even more. He desired to see the glory of God. Thus, we find what appears to be a contradiction regarding the vision of God. On the one hand, God says to Moses, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live." Right? But then Moses wanted to see, but Moses could not have seen God because nobody can see God and live. And so, in verse 14 of chapter 33 of Exodus, the Lord promised Moses, "My presence will go with you." Moses responded by saying, "This is how Israel would be distinguished from the other nations, by the Lord's abiding presence." And so, brothers and sisters, forbidden vision, is a third subtopic. And now we're coming down to the end, we're closing. And so, God reveals his goodness. And God reveals his goodness in Exodus 33, verses 18 to 23. And in these last verses, brothers and sisters, Moses had a unique relationship with the Lord. The Lord spoke to him face to face. He could not have seen the face of the Lord, but the Lord spoke to him face to face. However, Moses desired to see more than a form of God. He wanted to see the glory of God. The glory of God is God's splendor, his magnificence. But the glory can be revealed in degrees. A limited view of the glory appeared in the cloud over the tabernacle in Exodus 16:10. Later, when the temple was dedicated, the glory filled the house of God, according to 1 Kings 8:11. Still, these visions of the glory were not direct visions of God himself. No, because the Lord held Moses in high regard, he offered not to reveal himself more fully to Moses. He would show to Moses a part of his glory, but not all of it. And so God's revelation to Moses, however, would remain incomplete and somewhat veiled because Moses could not look directly upon God and live, according to Exodus 33 verse 20. The impact of seeing God's full glory would cause immediate death to any human being. Moses would stand in the cleft of the rock, according to verse 22, which refers to a crack or fissure in the rock face, and God would cover Moses as he passed by. Now, 2 points are emphasized in this passage. 1, God's unique and gracious revelation of himself to Moses, and 2, God's infinite and unimaginable splendor. On the other hand, we must resist any temptation to limit or reduce God to a level that we can comprehend. He is beyond comprehension. On the other hand, we can know and experience God's goodness, grace, and compassion. And if we should look back at Isaiah said, "Who can fathom the mind of God? Who can give him counsel? His ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts." So we can reason out God, because God is beyond our understanding, beyond our imagination. And so, in closing, brothers and sisters, the Sunday school lesson for today, entitled "Difficult Passages in Genesis and Exodus." Let me just close by saying, the 3 passages in this week's lesson contain elements that are strange to us and difficult to understand. However, despite their strangeness, each passage communicates a powerful and important message about serving God. These 3 stories teach us the seriousness of God's covenant and God's commandments. They tell us God is faithful to fulfill his promises, and they show us that God desires to reveal himself to his people. So again, let me just say to you that the topic of the lesson is difficult passages in Genesis and Exodus. We looked at this morning supernatural experience from Genesis 15 verse 17 to 18, dangerous omissions, Exodus 4:19 to 26, and forbidden vision from Exodus 33:11 to 23. And the golden text comes from Deuteronomy 29, verse 29. The secret things belong unto the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever. Brothers and sisters, please do read Genesis 15:7 to 18, Exodus 4:19 to 26, and Exodus 33:11 to 23 to have a fuller and better understanding of the lesson today. Difficult passages in Genesis and Exodus. Have a blessed Sunday. Bless you all.